There's a technique used by professional manipulators that works on anyone. No matter how smart you think you are, no matter how much you study human behavior, it works because it doesn't attack your logic. It attacks something far more primitive. And I'm going to prove that to you right now in this video while you're watching. Pay attention to this situation. You're in a group of friends. Someone asks us a simple question and everyone gives the same answer. Something you know is wrong. It's your turn. What do you do? Most people I ask say they would answer what they know is correct, that they wouldn't let themselves be influenced, that they have a strong enough personality for that. Hold on to that answer. You're going to need it in a moment. Experienced manipulators know something most people never learned. The human brain has two decision-making systems running at the same time. The first is rational, analytical, slow. It's the system you use when you solve a difficult problem, when you weigh pros and cons, when you think before you act. The second system is automatic, instinctive, absurdly fast. It processes the social environment around you without asking your permission and without warning you when it's operating. And it's exactly in that second system where manipulators work. Because while you're busy using the first one, the second has already made a decision for you. One of the most powerful ways to activate that second system is called social proof. The principle is simple and disturbing at the same time. When the brain isn't sure about something, it automatically looks at the behavior of people around it to decide what to do. It's not a conscious choice. It's a neurological shortcut that evolved over thousands of years because most of the time following the group was an efficient survival strategy. The problem is that this same mechanism, which once kept you alive, can today be used against you with surgical precision. Robert Cialdini spent decades studying how this technique is used in practice. What he discovered was that social proof doesn't need to be real to work. It just needs to seem real. An empty restaurant makes people doubt the food before they even try it. A line on the sidewalk makes people walk in without even knowing what's inside. A product with thousands of reviews sells more than a superior product with few reviews. The brain doesn't verify. The brain assumes. And manipulators know exactly how to manufacture that appearance of consensus to push you in the direction they want. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. This technique doesn't just work on consumer decisions. It works on your opinions, your beliefs, the way you perceive reality. In 1951, psychologist Solomon Asch ran an experiment that no one expected to produce those results. He placed people in a room to perform a ridiculously simple task, comparing the size of lines drawn on a card. The correct answer was obvious, visually impossible to get wrong. But before each participant answered, hired actors would say the wrong answer out loud. And what happened was that 75% of people agreed with the group at least once, giving an answer that contradicted what their own eyes were telling them. Not because they were weak, but because the second system, the one that operates without warning, registered the group's consensus as more reliable information than their own perception. Now remember the question I asked you at the beginning. You said you wouldn't let yourself be influenced, that you would answer what you know is correct. But the participants in Asch's experiment said the same thing when asked afterward. None of them believed they would give in, and yet 3 out of 4 people did. Because the difference between knowing about this mechanism and being immune to it is much smaller than we want to believe. And here's the part that truly advanced manipulators understand, and that almost nobody talks about. You don't need to be in a physical room with other people for this to happen. All it takes is perceiving that other people in any context seem to agree on something. Comments on a post, reactions in a conversation, the tone with which an idea is presented as if it were obvious, as if everyone already knew, as if questioning it were a sign of naivety. These are the modern triggers of social proof. And they are everywhere all the time, operating in your second system, while your first system is distracted, thinking it's in control. The million-dollar question is this: how do you protect yourself from something that acts before you even notice? Asch found an answer inside his own experiment. When there was just one other person in the room who disagreed with the group, even if that person gave a completely different answer from the correct one, the conformity rate plummeted. It wasn't necessary for someone to confirm the truth. It was only necessary for someone to break the illusion of unanimity. A single crack in the consensus was enough for people to start trusting their own perception again. What this reveals about how to defend yourself is simpler and more profound than any complicated technique. Protection doesn't start with a list of rules. It starts with a question you begin asking yourself automatically in any social situation. The question is simple. Am I changing my mind because a new argument appeared, or because the people around me seem to think differently than I do? It sounds obvious when written like that, but in the heat of a conversation, in a comment you're reading, in a meeting where everyone agrees on something that bothers you, that distinction disappears. And that's exactly where social proof does its work. When you notice that specific feeling of discomfort that comes from disagreeing with a group, that discomfort is not a signal that you're wrong. Very often it's exactly the opposite. It's your second system being activated. And recognizing that moment is what separates the person who is controlled by this mechanism from the person who can observe it without obeying it. Now, I need to tell you something about this video. From the very first second I used social proof on you, I started by saying this technique works on anyone, which activated in your brain the assumption that many other people have already been affected by it. Then I described Asch's experiment with the exact numbers of how many people gave in, creating the impression of an overwhelming consensus that made resistance seem almost unlikely. Every time I said that most people think a certain way, I was planting in your second system the reference of a group you would naturally tend to follow. You were learning about manipulation while being manipulated. And the most disturbing part is that knowing this now doesn't erase the effect, because the second system already processed everything, already registered, already acted. That is the truth manipulators don't want you to know. It's not that you're weak. It's that your brain was built this way and no one ever taught you to recognize when it's being used against you. The only real defense is not trying to shut this system down. It's learning to recognize it operating in real time. Because there is an enormous difference between the person who feels the discomfort of disagreeing and gives in without knowing why, and the person who feels that same discomfort, recognizes where it comes from, and consciously chooses what to do with it. That choice exists. Most people simply never know it's available.